Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jennifer Lee Disney, and I'm professor and chair of the Department of Political Science and director of the Women's and Gender Studies program here at Winthrop University. And I would like to welcome you to this evening's cultural event, Combating Sex Trafficking, using big data analytics to identify hotspot hotels with Dr. Edward Huang, associate professor at George Mason University in Fairfax County, Virginia. I would also like to thank this evening's event sponsors: the Departments of History, Political Science, and Interdisciplinary Studies, the programs in Peace, Justice, and Conflict Resolution Studies, and Women's and Gender Studies, and the John C. West Forum on Politics and Policy. Special thanks go to Dr. Catherine Chang for her role in organizing the event. Dr. Huang will provide us with a 40 to 45-minute presentation to show us the methodology of using technology and big data analytics to identify hotspot hotels, including here in South Carolina, to demonstrate that hotels have been critical sites for sex trafficking business operations. After the presentation, we will have time for a 15-minute question and answer session with the audience. Throughout the talk, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat, as we will be monitoring the chat and collecting your questions for the Q&A. We also ask that each of you desiring to earn cultural event credit tonight, keep your cameras on and your focus engaged throughout the event. In addition, we have a trigger warning for tonight's event. Due to the potentially emotionally triggering nature of the event, a counselor from Counseling Services, Optics of Victims Assistance Clinical Supervisor, Ms. Brianne Jones, is present with us this evening throughout the course of the event as a resource to provide immediate support services to students who have experienced violent crime or trauma. Please note that Ms. Jones has no stake in the nature of the material we are about to present. She is an unbiased presence to support you should you need to have a brief chat about your own reactions to this material during the event and beyond. Should you need to talk with the counselor, please use the chat function to send a private message to Brianne Jones, who you will be able to create a private message breakout room with to speak. Brianne is going to assist us in that breakout room process. We have placed her name in the chat as well, so please utilize that if and when necessary. And now we will proceed with this evening's event. In the United States, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, as amended by the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act of 2015, defines sex trafficking as recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting an individual through the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sex. It is not necessary to demonstrate force, fraud, or coercion in sex trafficking cases involving children under the age of 18. The International Labor Organization and Walk Free Foundation, in partnership with the International Organization for Migration, estimate that there are 4.8 million people trapped in forced sexual exploitation globally. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, whose website, phone number, and text we are also placing into the chat. Let me do that now. This is a quote. "Sex traffickers frequently target victims and then use violence, threats, lies, false promises, debt bondage, or other forms of control and manipulation to keep victims involved in the sex industry for their own profit. Sex trafficking exists within diverse and unique sets of venues and businesses, including fake massage businesses, escort services, residential brothels, in public, on city streets and in truck stops, strip clubs, hostess clubs, hotels and motels, and everywhere." A few years ago, while attending the Southeastern Women's Studies Association conference, I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Katarina Rosenblatt speak about her own personal experience from her 2014 book entitled "Stolen: The True Story of a Sex Trafficking Survivor." Dr. Rosenblatt was a lonely and abused child living in poverty with her family in a hotel, making her a target for sex trafficking criminals. One day, a young woman approached her at the hotel pool pretending to be a friend, and then used food, money, false friendships, threats, drugs, and violence to keep her trapped. Sex traffickers often use hotels as a part of their business model, which is why tonight's event is so important to increase the awareness of sex trafficking activities in South Carolina and throughout the nation, identify these hotspot hotels, and ultimately prevent sex trafficking. And now I would like to introduce this evening's speaker. Dr. Edward Huang is an associate professor in the Department of Systems Engineering and Operations Research at George Mason University. He received his BS and MS degrees from National Tsinghua University in Taiwan, and then another MS and a PhD degree in Industrial and Systems Engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology. Dr. Huang's research focuses on supply chain analysis. He has served as the primary investigator, PI, or co-PI of several research projects funded by the National Science Foundation, the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Activity, the College Industry Council on Material Handling Education, and many other federal agencies. Please join me in welcoming and giving your undivided attention to Dr. Edward Huang.
Thank you, Dr. Disney. It's my great pleasure to give the talk today. My name is Dr. Edward Huang, and today I will talk about the combating sex trafficking using big data analytics to identify hotspot hotel. So today, I think that I will, here is today's agenda. I will focus on 4 topics. First topic, I will give a brief introduction about me, what, where, like the quick go over your speaker so that you will know, oh, this is my speaker, what's his background, etc. And then we will focus on the sex trafficking in United States as a whole. And then the next one, we will talk about 6 classic type of business models for human trafficking. Then the last part, we will talk about the big data analytics for identify hotspot hotel. So today's talk is more on the data side. So I will show you so many data. How do we analyze? How do we understand this criminal, this trafficker? What's their behavior? How do they run this business? Then when we move to the last part, we will say like right now, can we use big data analytics or artificial intelligence to disrupt this kind of illicit supply chain? And then before I start this talk, I think I need to, let's say, I need to say that the whole work is funded by National Science Foundation. So I think that's, the NSSI, National Science Foundation is really care about all these kind of, let's say, sex trafficking, how do we disrupt them? So that is the one, the background about the research. So for myself, I'm associate professor from George Mason University. I think, you may know my education background. And I originally come from Taiwan, but I think I moved to United States in 2005, and then got the PhD degree and then work at George Mason. And this is my 9th year. So I worked there, at Mason for like 9 years. And then I was visiting professor at Singapore and Germany. So I have a many like a research collaboration with different university, so that I think that's help us to like have a global view, because some of them like human trafficking is not just United States. We know it's a global issue. So it's not just one issue, but internally, it's internationally. So now, let's say for my research, I have 3 major research area. I do a lot of cybersecurity and defense application. I work with many companies doing like an infrastructure protection system. So for that kind of project, we design a lot of we call the drone, like a UAV, and then they will like fly around, make sure we can protect like a nuclear power plant, etc. So that's one of them. I also collaborate with another university doing border security system, so that the south border, then we know where should we put some tower, make sure that the border is very secure using all these kind of technology. And for the Insider threat detection, I also work with the US intelligence community. So we try to apply some artificial intelligence and big data, this kind of technology to help us understand the insider threat of an organization or a government. So that's one type of, I would say, the cybersecurity and the defense application. Another one, I also do a lot of commercial supply chain. I work with other, let's say, a very big port, I would say top 10 port in a seaport around the world, so that we know how do we design this kind of seaport so that it will be very efficient. And then also work for the defense company for the Joint Street Fighter supply chain. And I also work with one major pharmacy design their clinical trial. So right now you may hear like this COVID vaccine, right? So how do they ship to your house or like ship to the clinic? In fact, I did that. So right now I know like how they ship it and then how they make sure that they can deliver it quickly. So after I do all these kind of project, I think 3 years ago, I asked myself, yes, all of this kind of project, I can apply big data analytics. I can learn, I know artificial intelligence, I know all this kind of stuff. I can, design efficient, make sure that that system is smart, efficient, that kind of thing. But then I asked myself, wait a moment, if I do all this kind of project, if I do more and more, who will get the money? And then I realized that, yes, the company will get the money. But in the United States right now, there are so many minorities, right? So they really need some people to help them. Then, 3 years ago, I started using all these kind of AI and the data analytics, technique, and then try to address illicit supply chain. So 3 years ago, then I start doing like the human trafficking, try to understand this supply chain, how they operate, how this criminal operate this supply chain. Then later on, we know how to disrupt them. And then we also have another big project related to the counterfeit goods, like your mask. Right now, we all know like this mask, where do they come from? How do we, let's say, make sure we can buy the real mask and OPOA? So all these 3 projects right now is my and our group's ongoing project. So we do all of them, and then we spend more time on this illicit supply chain, because we recognize that all these kind of data analytics and the artificial intelligence, if we develop algorithm, we also want to use this algorithm to protect our citizens, not just for company. So that's like my background. So that's my story. So now we will move to today's main topic, human trafficking. So human trafficking, you may hear the human trafficking, like these days when I take the flight, in Atlanta airport, they always like announce something like, oh, they care about the human trafficking awareness is very important, that kind of thing. And then right now, human trafficking is really an issue in the United States. So human trafficking, by the definition from the United Nations, you can see is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receive of the person, so that it can we consider 2 types of human trafficking. One is we call the labor trafficking, another one is sex trafficking. So around the world, if we see the numbers, human trafficking is really a big issue. If we see like a whole world, how many victims we have per year? It's 2.4 million. Okay, victims per year, but depends on the country. We know some country, they have many, like we see like some Asian country, the labor trafficking is the major issue. Africa, some labor trafficking. United States, sex trafficking can be the majority. And then a lot of traffickers earn a lot of money from this business. So they really know how to run this business. So for us, we know this is a big crime. It's one major crime, right, globally. And then if we just drill down to United States, we just see United States. Then we can see United States, if we see all these numbers from the Polaris data, and also we collaborate with the Human Trafficking Institute, then we have all these kind of data set. We know within this 13 years, 12 years, and then just in United States, we have more than 23,000 survivors. And then the trafficker, we can see 5,800 and more. And then the federal cases, more than 1,000, right? So these are the data we know. So we really know like a human trafficking can be a big issue. And then when we see this kind of let's say we see the human trafficking issue, then we try to collect the data, right? And then many people, like last year, we know it's a pandemic, right? To 2020, that's the year I really don't want to remember, but it's a pandemic, right? So we are locked down at home. Now, so at that moment, all our research team just asked me, hey, Professor Huang, I mean, right now we are, locked down, as just stay at home. Human trafficking will be gone, right? So because we cannot go outside. But when we see the number, first one, human trafficking data always increasing, right? That's 2019. When we move to the last year data, right now I will just show you South Carolina data. We can see the number of open investigation of a human trafficking in South Carolina. Last year in the beginning, this is the starting point of the pandemic, March, right? That is the month I really don't want to remember, but right, that's the month. So you can see in the beginning, yes, the human trafficking, the open case investigation goes down, right? Go down a little bit, but after a few months, right now, they go up again, right? So right now we can see right now the cases become more. And then this is just for South Carolina. We also collect data from other states. Other state, it goes, I would say, very high. Some states report that they will be the number of cases is triple. It's triple per year. So these kind of cases become more and more. And then right now, when we analyze the data, we recognize that because of a pandemic, in the beginning we say we lock down at home, so we cannot go outside. They should not have labor trafficking or sex trafficking. But in fact, it's just opposite. Why? Because there are so many people, they may not be able to pay their rent. They become like a homeless. They become run away. In this case, the trafficker, they know, hey, right now, this is their business opportunity. So they will try to recruit this person, say, hey, right now, you may worry about your food or your living, the kind of, I can provide to you. But in the case, it's not for free. There is no free lunch. Then we will want, find some business for you. So that is something we can see like right now, after the pandemic, we can see the human trafficking will become even, I would say, the one major issues around the country. I mean, in the United States. So now, if we see the human trafficking case in South Carolina, you can see what are the top 5 counties. So you can guess, but I can tell you, in fact, it's very interesting when I see this data. Some county, I'm not sure, right? I'm not familiar with the South Carolina, but I can tell you the city. Number 1 is Myrtle Beach. Okay, so it makes sense, right? So it's like sometimes when they have a vacation, they may want to call some service, right? Special service. So this is 1. Number 2, you can see the city, Charleston. Number 3 is Greenville, and then Columbia, and then here is Anderson County. So you can see right now, you can see the number of cases, usually they will associate with some cities. Yes, we know like a city side, usually they have more cases because they will want to, because when some people travel to that city, they may like looking for some, illegal service, right? So illegal service. So that is the one. But the interesting thing for human trafficking, like a sex trafficking, is it's not just for city. Although if we see the number of cases, it's always, we always see some pattern, like a big city, they will have more cases. But if even though we go to some rural city, we also can see some like a sex trafficking case. I mean, I'm not talking about the South Carolina. It's like in general in the United States, we also see a lot of cases. They don't choose the city, because when you go to the kind of the countryside, no one knows what's going on. Then they can have a resort. They can do something illegal, and then they may not be caught, right? They will be they can be hide, right? So that's another trend we have seen so far. So that's from the South Carolina. So you can see like some of them, yes, they are really associated with the city. So now, as I mentioned before, human trafficking, 2 things, labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So now we can move to just for the sex trafficking. But you may say, why? Labor trafficking can be also important, right? But in fact, when we analyze the data set, sex trafficking, we see all the federal cases. Sex trafficking in United States count for 88% of all the cases. So you can see sex trafficking in the United States are the majority. Labor trafficking, yes, we have some, but just 11%, right? So of all the cases. So sex trafficking, right now, this is let's say the federal cases. We just, we draw like how many cases in each state. Then you can see like some cases. Each state they all have some cases, and then the majority one is Texas, and then the California, and then New York, and then California. And then when we compare this data set and the Polaris data set, Polaris is a hotline, right? Then we recognize that the Polaris is a hotline. So usually for us, it's like a front end. If someone call that hotline, they will record it to become a case. And then Human Trafficking Institute report is a little bit different. This is a federal case. So usually it's like at the end of an investigation. For us, this is a real case. We already know that is the case. They have a certain case number, etc. So that will be the difference between this kind of two data set. So if we see South Carolina, sex trafficking is also a major issue, right? So you can see labor trafficking, sex trafficking. Yes, sex trafficking is much higher than the labor trafficking. And then South Carolina, 2020, I think the number goes down a little bit, so that's great. But I think that the major issue right now will be 2021, because right now most states expect that a higher number this year. This year will be always, I would think most people will think that will be higher because of the pandemic. So right now we are expecting a higher number compared to the last year. So if we see South Carolina, most sex trafficking, their venue, the number one is illicit massage. So I think I will mention that how they run this kind of illicit massage in the next section. Another one, they use the hotel, motel, and then can be apartment, can be residential, commercial, that kind of thing. So these are the menu in South Carolina. So now, in our team, we review all the federal cases in South Carolina. So you can see this is like a 9 years case. And then in the bottom is our analysis result. So we analyze like 9 cases, and then we analyze like each case in detail, like how what type of human trafficking, why these defendants, how do they operate it, etc. So for all these South Carolina case, 8 of them are sex trafficking, 1 is the labor trafficking. So I think it's match the percentage we see for the national pattern, and then the average dependents, etc. But the key thing is you can see the average victims 3.5, but the average minors 2. So you can see most cases they recruit minors. Right, so they try to use these kind of minors and then try to exploit them and then try to earn the money. You run the business using these minors. So for us, this kind of thing is important. We want to develop some technology so that we can detect this kind of and disrupt this kind of criminal activity upfront. Otherwise, we cannot save these minors, right? And then the 44% related to hotel, motel. So I think that's the next topic I will talk, the hotel, motel, why they can become, the critical point for this sex trafficking business. And then the last one, the average is sentencing months. You can see on average is more than 10 years, right? So it's a big penalty. So I think we really want to prevent sex trafficking in the state. And now I will move to the next topic. Right now, in the previous slide, I just give you an overview. In United States, what's the number? In South Carolina, what's the number? So right now, we want to see is usually all these kinds of, let's say, human trafficking, how do they run this business? How do they run? We analyzed all the cases in the United States. We can say when we want to see just sex trafficking, we see their network itself is so dynamic, very, very dynamic. Depends on which case you are talking about. And then here, this is a real case. We don't make it up. It's a real case. In one case, we see, oh, they recruit, the victim in Minnesota, and then they may take a flight, they can, rent some, they may take an Uber, or they have their own private taxi, that kind of thing. So they can move this victim around, and then sometimes they will use this victim's identity to open the bank account to make sure that we cannot trace. But right now, human trafficking, trace the money is always a pattern. In fact, they say all the banks, and as we talk to all these banks, then when they do all this kind of financial transaction, then the bank actually will mark something, say, this transaction may relate to sex trafficking. So that's the reason right now we can see like a victim, they may use, the trafficker may use the victim's identity to create a bank, make sure that they will not be caught or being investigated. So that's one. And then they may buy in the car, they may buy some luxury, that kind of thing. And then their transportation, they usually change different type of transportation. For the marketing, they may just find their client, let's say using Facebook or Snapchat, this different kind of thing, Craigslist, and back page, etc. So right now, all these kind of website become one channel for them to find their customer. And then usually they will, in this world, we know every time when we see like a Super Bowl, like this kind of like an event, right? Then we always know there will be some sex trafficking associated with it. Because when you have a big event, then this trafficker, they know they can run the business, so that they will try to find a customer in that city. So we always know Super Bowl, oh, okay, we will be busy because we need to analyze this kind of a transaction data. We need to see right now what's the internet posting, that kind of thing. So that's another pattern. But in general, it's very dynamic. And if we see their pattern, right now the classical 6 business model, Chinese group, etc. So these are the 6 group, but I cannot cover all of them. So I will only talk about 3 of them, 3 major one in the United States. One is the Chinese group, American pimp model, and the Mexican groups. For Chinese group, it's not really just for Chinese, no, but it's the first, the model we found is from the Chinese people, but I think a lot of Asian countries, they also follow the same pattern. They usually recruit the people, let's say from Asia, can be men or and a woman, men for labor trafficking, woman for the sex trafficking. So they will try to, let's say, usually they have some business in Asia, but that one is more like the debt collection company. So they may, borrow a lot of money so that this company will say, oh, you cannot pay back, right? Okay, fine. There is one way you can pay back is I will, we have some, smuggler will bring you to the United States illegally. And then when you go there, this kind of people, they will run the business, and then they will operate as a business from the start to the end. They will have some, you can see like the illicit massage parlor, or they can have another store. They operate the one physical location. So a lot of massage parlor, they follow this pattern. So when we analyze this kind of a business model, the interesting thing is we don't know why, but that's a pattern we see again and again. And then they want to record every expense in detail. So when we cut, in the case, they will tell you, yeah, they will just write down all their expense. For example, take a taxi for like $5, that kind of thing. They will write down that one in detail, every step. We don't know why, but that's how they do. But I think these kind of people, they always want to run as long-term business. So they will spend a lot of time trying to make sure that the officer in Asia or the officer in other country, they are safe. They will not try to find give them the trouble. So they pay a lot of money for corruption. So to make sure that they will not come to this massage every time. And then another interesting thing we know from the data is, if you go to some like a massage parlor, that a massage store, you don't know they are illicit or illicit. This is not a general rule, but from the data, we found that if they use neon light, like the red line, that kind of thing, they have a high chance to be illicit. We just don't know why. But from the data, we found that, wow, why? But if they have used this kind of light, they have a high chance to be the illicit one. But I think maybe that's the way they operate the business. But that's what we learned from this kind of a business model. Another one is the American pimp model. American pimp model is a little bit different. This kind of a, let's say, pimp, they don't have the physical location. They change their location all the time. They may come kind of one city and then next month move to another city. So they travel around the United States. So they can be in one state and then next month go to another state. So usually their target people will be American girls and women. And then they will, sometimes when you see like the runaway, homeless, that kind of thing, that's the point. They want trying to recruit this kind of a person. And then the business they do is they usually use internet. In the previous model, like illicit massage, they will have like a long-term customer. But for the pimp model, they always need to find the customer. So they use internet a lot. So that's the reason when we see this kind of a pattern, internet is one of the very important data source, because from the internet we can learn a lot of these kind of people, where they are now, where do they go next. And then they may operate from the street and then high consumption. So for this kind of people, if we don't stop them, if we cannot stop them, you will see victims every month. Because after they do that, they just get rid of them, get to find another people. So they run a little bit different than the Chinese group. And then sometimes this pimp model, they can link to the drug. So right now, when we analyze the drug network, right now we analyze the heroin or fentanyl drug, we see that these two networks, they will converge because they also buy drug to control this victim. So this kind of a network, they converge. And most income goes to the luxury goods. So that's another pattern we don't know. Usually they would like to buy the luxury car. They will buy the kind of a jewelry. So we don't know why, but this kind of there must be some culture reason behind it. But from the data, we know this kind of a pattern. Another one is the Mexican group. Mexican group usually they will associate with human smuggler. The human smuggler help this victim, cross the border into the United States, and then but they don't have enough money to pay back, right? So to repay. So in this case, they would just say, "Oh, you don't have the money. Don't worry." But right now we have some people who doing like the sex trafficking. So usually this kind of a group, they run the business like a supermarket model. This is really, it's for us, it's like, why? This is ridiculous. But they sometimes they may just say supermarket, right? So it's cheap, but can find a lot of a customer. So sometimes they will just trade a woman like, oh, you will have 30 clients per day, but each of them doesn't charge a lot of money. And then they don't pay a lot of money to the advertisement. But usually you will see like some business card on the back, they will write down like a Spanish words, say, oh, if you are looking for some service, they kind of thing, call certain number. But for me, I don't understand that language. I would not, I don't understand, right? But we know a lot of things they use this way to make sure the client is all Hispanic. They don't want to expand their customer to, to the internet or to other group. And then after they earn money, sometimes they will buy investment or try to like transfer back money back to their home country. So that's another one. So after we study all these kind of a business model, we ask ourselves, yeah, right now, 3 business model, massage, is a physical location. We want to know is it illicit or legitimate, right? But the pimp model, they are travel around, right? Then is hotel the key? Can be, right? Because if they travel around, they usually use hotel, right, as their venue, right? Then right now, in our research team, we just ask ourselves, yes, right now, hotel can be the major issue. But the question will be for this hotel, are they really the important point for this like a sex trafficking? And then in our research group, we know a lot of things about the data analytics and the artificial intelligence. Then we ask ourselves, yes, can I apply all these kind of data analytics and that kind of artificial intelligence to help us prevent that, because we don't want more victims, right? So now here we analyze several cases in Virginia. This is one Virginia case, is in Alexandria, Virginia, is a game group. And then here you can see the upper part, the first layer is an illicit activity. We draw their social network. We draw how they run the business. Some of them, they are doing recruitment, right? So we will say, oh, recruitment, are they, recruit based on their family member, their friend, or their, colleague, that kind of thing. And then the upper part, the bottom part will be like the recruitment, what kind of facility they use. The legal business, that's a facility. So we try to analyze the whole illicit supply chain. And then when you see this kind of a case, illicit activity and the, let's say, legal business, they have some intersect, right? So that's what we say. This criminal, they always doing something like a camouflage, right? They want to hide their identity. They will not tell everybody. They will not just on the street say, hey, I'm the trafficker. They don't do that. They will always behave just like a normal person, right? Bring a girl and then go to the go to the some motel, hotel, that kind of thing. So they try to camouflage just like a legitimate business. So right now, if we want to detect this, what's the entry point? You can see, like this case, entry point is the hotel, motel, this kind of hotel, motel, right? And then this is just one case. Then we go to another case and then say, oh, for other cases, do they have the similar pattern? That's another case. We draw the whole supply chain and analyze their structure. When we see this legal business, they all hotels. They also like move from one hotel to another hotel to another hotel. So we analyze more and more this kind of case. Then we recognize that for all these, let's say, sex trafficking case, the interesting thing is, right now, these are all the federal cases, right? 84% related to internet. They find a customer either from like the backpage.com. Right now it's offline. But in fact, in our research group, we still have around 90 pages still online right now. So that people, we trace all the activity there, in that website, so that we know what's going on there. So they do a lot of internet activity. Another thing is, for all these cases, 81%, 82% related to hotel and motel. So this is a large number. So then we know like, oh, if I want to like disrupt this kind of activity, hotels can be the gateway, right? If we can like protect, let's say, this hotel, make sure they understand like how important of this issue, then we can try to understand it or disrupt this kind of a supply chain. Okay, and then here, so that's a case summary. When we analyze this network, the social network, their business model, like different kind of a business model, and the facility they use, we see, oh, hotel, motel is one key thing. So if we can understand this kind of hotel, motel more, then we can know more about their operation. And then we can know like how do we disrupt them. Okay, so that's the summary. Hotels, motels become the hotspot in the sex trafficking supply chain. And then another motivation we can see right now, let's say many years ago, we see so many cases like this, let's say, hotels owner. In the beginning, when they realize that, they realize that they may have some sex trafficking in their hotel. They can be like the cleaner, like cleaning staff, and then when they clean up, they just say, why? It's a little bit weird, right? So sometimes it's a little bit, easy to notify that. But we recognize that some hotel owner, they don't want to handle it. The reason is very simple. They just want to earn money, and they will just say, yes, they are my customer. I want them come back or become like a long-term customer, that kind of thing, right? Trafficker, they do the same thing. If they say this hotel if it's very safe, if I do some business there, they don't do anything, then they will want to book the same hotel again, because they say, yes, right now it's safe there. Why do I need to book a hotel that's, I don't know, there are too many uncertainty there. But if I book the hotel, which I already used like 1 year ago, 2 years ago, then I can reuse it. But right now, these days, we know these hotels, they will have a legal responsibility if they observe this kind of activity and then they don't report it. So for the hotel owner, if they don't do something, they don't call the hotline, they don't try to prevent the sex trafficking activity, who using their facility, they may have some issues. They may, they will have some lawsuit against to their behavior. But the question will be for this hotel owner, they still don't know. Sometimes if they can see it, that's good. But they don't even know am I the target? Am I, should I need to improve my, training to my staff, that kind of thing. Right now, when we analyze all the hotel, not many hotel have the training for sex trafficking. So they don't train this kind of staff, so that this staff, they would just keep what they run the model, before. So right now for us, we recognize that the hotels, motel now have the legal responsibility for facilitating sex trafficking. Then go back to our domain. We know the data. We know the supply chain. We know artificial intelligence. Right now, we know their supply chain, how they look like. We know that we have the data. Then we ask ourselves, yes, what can we do, right? So as a researchers, we want to do something that can prevent this. Then we just say, yes, how about this? We can use artificial intelligence and then use all the geo data. Try to support us, say, hey, in the future, can you tell me which hotel can be the hotspot? So then we can talk to these owners, say, hey, right now, based on the research, based on the previous case, based on all this kind of data set, some hotel can be an issue. So that if you are one of them, yes, we can provide you like a full set of the training material so that you can, you can make sure that you can prevent this kind of thing using your facility. So that's the whole goal we want to, accomplish. The past 3 years. So artificial intelligence, these are the, some research question we want to do. We want to understand why they always choose some particular hotel motel. And then what is the probability of the hotel, or how do we identify what are the high risk one? But this kind of question is difficult, right? Because we are predicting the future. How do we know tomorrow? How do we know next year? Right? That's difficult, right? So it's like a forecasting question. So for us, we spend a lot of time developing the artificial intelligence, say, hey, right now, yes, if we want to do this kind of forecasting, how do we use all the data, all the case data, all the geo-reference data? How do we use all of them to predict the risk for next day, for next year, for the future? What kind of hotel have a high risk? So that's something we did in our research group. So what we did is we apply artificial intelligence. So we collected so many data, like for every zip code, we will collect their, what's their population, what's their average income, what's the average hotel price, etc. So this kind of data, we collect all of them. And then we collect all the case, let's say, happened before, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what are the cases? And then we use all these kind of data set to train this computer, make sure that the computer is smart enough, artificial intelligence, right? And then to predict the future. So we also have the domain expert in our team, so that we can, the domain expert also give us the input to tuning this kind of artificial intelligence. So this kind of thing can be new. Why? Because let's say your previous one, let's say, if we talk to all these company or nonprofit organization, they only can analyze it one by one, but they don't have that kind of like artificial intelligence to help them forecast the future or predict what's going on there. So we use this kind of algorithm and artificial intelligence to learn the historical data, predict the future. So what we did is more like the probability theory. So we have some hypothesis, and then internally we use the probability. We say, hey, right now, if we want to know like which hotel in the future is a high risk, so we can use like some like a conditional probability, that kind of thing. But this is just a high level one. In general, the idea we did is we call, this is the data set we have. You can see this is the geo reference data. So we collected all these kind of data, and then we developed something called the Bayesian network. Bayesian network is like a network. They all have their own probability. We have a different kind of a data source. So we can see like a different data source, what kind of a relationship. And then when we see any existing data, we can use that historical data to update all these training sets to make sure they will become smarter, smarter, and smarter. So it's also learning over time. So when we have more data put into it, then they will learn more so that they can have the better, like accuracy for the next iteration. So that's how we did. So right now we do is we also, for all the data set, we have the training data set, the 4 years data set. We use the 4 years data set in Texas, New York, California, Michigan, and Minnesota. And then we have used the last one as a testing data set to see how good, right? How good of our algorithm. This is some like the study result. Right now, we want to expand this. Right now, you can see only 5 states. We want to expand to the whole United States so that in the future, we can see like, oh, for every hotel, then this kind of artificial intelligence, how do they know which one can be the potential threat, right? So how do we make sure that this hotel, we can talk to them and then we can like improve their, awareness, this kind of human trafficking, sex trafficking awareness. So for the conclusion, I would say the implication from this talk, I think you may get some idea about this human trafficking, sex trafficking, why this can be one important issues in the United States. It's not just one. We also do like the opioid or they say counterfeiting goods. They are also, I would say, the major issue. But here, when we see the sex trafficking, depends on their models, right? Chinese model, usually we want to identify this massage parlor, illicit massage parlor. For the American pimp model, hotels are the keys. We know like this is the key to the intersection between illicit and legal, this business. So it's this kind of work, we also can like support the lawsuits of human trafficking victims. And then they have like the application, which show like, okay, we're using like data, using artificial intelligence, how do we understand their underlying structure? How do we like prevent or disrupt this kind of illicit activity? So that's also like and the last one is that this result also help the hotels, motels develop policy and the strategy to ensure the sex trafficking supply chain. So all this work right now, we also present to the congressional staff so that they know like what kind of a technique we have, and then they say how do we define a better policy to prevent all these kinds of sex trafficking. So that's the last slide, and then any question?
I'll say, any questions? This chat is on fire. Dr. Huang, this has been an incredible talk. I've never seen this many questions coming in. I have been typing them over and grouping them. I have over 20 questions for you, and I'm trying to group them by category. So we might not get to everything, and apologies to those in the chat if we don't. But I have done my best to group what has been coming in. So let's just get started. First of all, thank you. Let's give some applause to Dr. Huang for his presentation. And let me just jump in.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. First, what percentage of victims are recruited from within the U.S. versus recruited from abroad? And that's a recruitment question, but another question about U.S. and international has to do with, are the majority of victims kept within the U.S. or trafficked abroad? And one of our students commented, I could see that there would be great difficulty following someone if they were actually trafficked abroad. So could you talk about the recruitment aspect and the traveling aspect in terms of U.S. and abroad?
I mean, from the data set, we know is right now, this kind of an actual number is really difficult to observe. The reason is very simple. If we see let's say Asian model or Chinese model, they kind of illicit massage, usually it's very difficult to find the victim because they need to pay the debt, right? So usually their passport is under control by the trafficker. So this kind of case, I mean, when we see all these case file, it's not many, but we know they can be much more than what we observe from the case file, because they will not think them as a victim. They will just say, yeah, because I need to pay back, so right now I need to follow that. American pimp model, we have the more cases. So this kind of a case is when we see that the right now in United States, we have a clear like, okay, right now for the victim, how do we do? So this kind of cases, we know more. We can observe more. So like this kind of question, I would say it's pretty like the camouflage, right? So some case is very difficult to detect. So right now the action numbers is very hard to, to get, because some of them is really, hiding there. We know something there, but we don't know. We don't know how many they have.
Just realized I was muted. Do we typically see women more often as victims as compared to men? That's another question that came in.
Yes, I think a woman's case are much more than men's, right? So I think for the sex trafficking, labor trafficking is a little bit different, but I think in United States we don't have the many labor trafficking case, and it also depends on the state. Yeah, depends on the state.
So in addition to the gender question, a group of age questions came up. So I want to ask you the questions that came up around age.
Okay.
What are the age ranges of people we most often see trafficked? Someone asked, why do they tend to target minors as victims of trafficking? Someone else asked, are people 50 and older also at risk? And then another related question, what are the statistics of college students becoming victims? So we have age range, minors, 50 and older, and college students.
Yeah, we do have this kind of data, but I think I need to look up, right? So the actual percentage, I don't remember all of these numbers, right? There are too many numbers. But
These
from the case,
questions, aren't they, Dr. Huang? These are great questions. I'm so proud of our students. Outstanding.
Right. I think that's great, because I'm impressed about this kind of question, because it's like a very professional question, right? And then usually we know, like let's say the under 15, usually that's run away is a major issue, because they say they may fight with the parents, that kind of thing, so that this trafficker, they will, it's the business for them. So I would say for the college student, I mean, the number will going down a little bit. So that's, I would just say that the previous data set, but I need to check the actual numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Do traffickers tend to prey on weak victims or pay no regard to strength? To talk a little bit about who is typically targeted by traffickers.
Can you repeat again, please?
Yes. Students want to know, do traffickers typically prey on weaker victims, or do they pay no regard to strength? We've talked about how people that are members of vulnerable populations are typically targeted by traffickers. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so that's also a very good question. Usually, they say American pimp model, in the beginning, they will pray. They say, oh, you are beautiful, we can work together, I love you, but we need some money to live, that kind of thing. So that's usually in the beginning, they will do that. But then usually we see so many patterns, they say over time, they will just try to give them the drug, because they say, yes, when I give you the drug, you will follow all the instructions I need, because you need the drug. And then in the meantime, they also can just say, pay just a little money, buy the drug, and then they say the victim will do everything they want. So usually they say for the later stage, they may be a little bit different, but still depends on the criminal group. Some of them, if they already deal with the drug business, they may just use the drug in the beginning.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Huang. Let me get out my list.
Yep.
Someone asked, if victims are identified, are traffickers also identified as well? And I think a related question about the identification process, someone asked, what methods are used to book hotels that require photo ID? Are there cash payments being used? So students are thinking about the identification process, and what do traffickers maybe sometimes do to give away their identity, or in some of your research, when victims are identified, does that help also in tracking down the traffickers?
Right. I mean, this is also a wonderful question, I can say. Let's say, from our data, we recognize that, let's say, if we are talking about the internet activity, they go to the internet, they post the ad there, and then say, hey, here is the, some victim. I mean, we have that kind of thing. And then usually the people who post it may be the criminal group, or they may hire some IT guy to post, this kind of, like the ad to the different kind of website. And then the interesting thing is they usually use the same ad, but to go to the different kind of, forum. I mean, right now, Craigslist is much better, but many years ago, Craigslist is one of them. You can see so many ads there. And so then why they do this? Because they can hide their identity. They usually don't use the victim's ID. They just like use either their own ID, because you post that no one can trace back you. You just have an email address, right? Or the IT guy who will try to post all of that. And then if we are talking about a hotel, they will be different. Some people use the victim. And then usually they try to avoid using credit card, because when they pay the credit card, we will know like, oh, who is doing that kind of thing. But when we analyze all these, let's say criminal group, the interesting thing is if we say the leader, sometimes they don't handle money. They always like a leader, they will find people to do the recruitment, or they will find another people who just do the payment. And then the payment, sometimes they will use let's say their carrier, like the driver who have a long-term contract, ask them to pay, because in this case, they can try to hide their identity. Some case they will use the victims, the numbers, create bank account to do the transaction. So they do many things, but I would say still depends on the people. Some people, they are really smart. They really know how to hide their identity. So for us, when we see their internet activity, or when we see, hey, right now there are some transactions from that, usually we will block that transaction for sure. But then we will like call the investigation and then make sure that we start this kind of file. But some criminal, sometimes it's take a long time to identify the people. So we need to find the victim first, and then, okay, make sure that the victim, some victim, they don't want to say anything because they are being threatened, or, the kind of thing, they may not tell you. But some of them, they will, over time, they may tell you, okay, who is the next one? So this kind of investigation takes some time. It's not just like, okay, investigation, tomorrow I get everyone. No. Yeah. So every case can be a little bit different.
So talking about the cases and this process of identifying traffickers, two students asked, one, what happens to the places that are caught sex trafficking? And then someone else asked, how often do hotel owners or hotel managers know that this is going on?
Oh, okay. The first one, they say, where do they being caught? And it depends on the case. Some case they are just in their house. So many people, we just like we see the case that when they are at home, and then suddenly the police comes and then say, hey, right now you are associated with something, you are under the charge, that kind of thing. That's like one case. I mean, several cases we see that kind of a pattern. What is the second question? Sorry.
It's okay. The second question, do hotel managers and hotel owners tend to know or not tend to know when this is happening in their business?
Yeah, some of them, they do know it. So in some case file, we know like, oh, they know it, but they just behave like, I don't know, right? Some of them, they really know. I mean, they don't know. They may be, this is also very difficult to say. Some cases, yes, they know, yes, here is something, the staff already report to the owner. Some owner, they will, when they go to the court, they will always try to say, I don't know at all, because, if they say anything, say, yes, I know it, they know they will have a corresponding, legal responsibility. So they try to avoid that. So that's another one we see right now. Actual number, we don't know. We do have let's say the cases like we do have the cases that say that the percentage like hotel owner realize it, because this kind of thing, usually in the case file, we can see it. Then we always know like they will have a follow-up case, because the victims, they can sue the hotel because of that.
Okay, now we get into the perspective questions around victims and survivors.
Okay.
A couple of things. One, what can one do to avoid this happening to them? And related, if someone comes across a victim, what is the safest way to help a victim? So how can we avoid becoming victims, avoid this happening to us? And if we come across a victim, what is the safest way to help? I just think these are incredible questions our students are coming up with.
I think this is great. In the beginning, I also want to create a slide for this because for us, the sex trafficking awareness is a very important point, right? So we know like it still depends on the business model they run. Mexican group, unless you know their society, otherwise it's difficult to get in. Chinese group, I mean, usually when you go to like this kind of massage, that kind of place, or you see some, like I don't know why, but the neon lights, right? The kind of thing. Then they have some chance they can be the illicit. So the question is, if you see like they may associate with some sex activity, that kind of thing, then this is one way you can call this Polaris hotline. Like they receive a lot of calls. Some of them is just just suspicious activity, but they will always do the follow-up activity. American pins model is a little bit different. They can be your friends, they can be homeless, they can be run away, that kind of thing. So usually, if you have a friend who is like who just leave the house, right, because of some argument, that kind of thing. So you may want to know like where they are, that kind of thing, to keep sure make sure that they are still safe. Another one is, I mean, right now these days, when you drive around, you see some like homeless or like runaway people. Sometimes they may walk, over the street. I mean, alone. They may not. They look like they don't have a home. That kind of thing. This is a good, good starting point. You can call the hotline. Make sure that this kind of person, they can be very safe. Like this year, I think a truck association, they do is like they train their driver. This truck, the commercial driver, they always drive, to the major road, right? So they also train their driver to, improve their awareness. When they drive it, they see they got some like the alone, lady girls, and then they don't have a house, or they are try to, be survive, out over the street. Then they will train this kind of a driver to do, to like call the hotline, make sure they are safe. So that's another one you can do. So that's what happening this year. For us, if you are on vacation, you go to a hotel, that's also another one. If you see any like a suspicious activity, like okay, maybe someone they just being punished, being like that kind of thing, then this is the one way you can call the hotline, because the motel is another, let's say, the venue, possible venue for sex trafficking. Yeah.
You mentioned this before, but if you want to say anything more about how the pandemic has increased sex trafficking rates.
Mm-hmm. I think that they say the pandemic actually, we know this kind of a pandemic provide a good environment for this trafficker, because right now a lot of people, they are struggling. They may not have money to buy food, etc. So right now we know like you may hear one term called the survival sex, right? So that's when they lose everything, they lose their job, they lose their house, they lose something, so that the only thing they can be survival is like just sell themselves, that kind of thing. So this kind of thing during the pandemic right now, I think that can be one major issue. So I know so many like a nonprofit organization right now, they will just like say, okay, try to reach this kind of people, make sure that they don't go to that path. Because when they go to that path, they may never come back, because that's trafficker. They will say, this is the target people. When they recruit these people, I can earn a lot of money. I can have more girls. I can have more ad, and then make sure that I reach more clients. Then I can earn more money, out of this. So right now, the source is the key. And then from our side, we know it's like if we can find the trafficker earlier, then we can save a lot of people. Because these people, if we cannot identify them quickly, victim, we will see more and more. There is no way to stop them, because they will always run this business.
I think it's such an important point you have made when you've said the environment that COVID-19 has created an environment of where there's economic precarity, where there's food insecurity, where people are struggling, that creates an environment that traffickers can prey upon in terms
Yeah.
of targeting people that are even more vulnerable in this environment than maybe they usually would be,
Right.
more needy.
Right.
Someone has asked, what relationship have you found, if any, between illegal immigration and sex trafficking?
Illegal immigration. Okay. In United States, let's say for the illegal immigrant, if they are, let's say, there is a one kind of a visa. I don't remember. It's maybe L or L visa or something. That is the visa. Let's say if we see this kind of can be a labor trafficking victim or sex trafficking visa. Let's say if we have any case related to that, then usually they can apply. We always have like a nonprofit organization. This lawyer will try to file the case for them so that they don't need to go back to their country. They still can be stay in the United States. But for this kind of people, usually it's harder to, let's say, to find, harder to find, because most of them, sometimes we see some case like a Chinese model. I mean the trafficker, they will hold their passport. So for this kind of victim, they don't even want to run away, because if they leave that building, then they don't have a passport. They were afraid that the police will try to catch them and then send back to them, right? So this kind of a case, they would just like they would just follow the rule, follow the traffickers, like that kind of rule. So that become difficult to detect these kind of people. Yeah.
Final two questions I have on my list. Could you talk about the link between port cities and trafficking? Why port cities become so important in this dynamic?
Okay. Usually we see, let's say, entertainment cities, right? Entertainment city, like some related, they have like a very good entertainment industry. Usually this kind of city have a high risk to have sex trafficking, because when people have entertainment, they are looking for something more than that. So that's what we know. Poor city, it depends on what kind of we know labor trafficking. Sometimes they will associate with a poor county or poor city, because they may hire like a free labor or cheap labor to do all these kind of, can be farm work, that kind of thing. That's one of them. Another one, usually the poor city, I would say, if some county, they have resort, they kind of facility, then they also have a high chance, because they are not just choose a cheap hotel. It depends on the business model they run. Some business model, they really choose like a cheap hotel. And then, if some county, they have a cheap hotel, they choose that because they want to save money. So that's one way. Another business model, like a escort service, they would just say, I don't care. Just give me the 5-star hotel. I want the best one, best hotel, whatever they are. That one is good because I'm targeting, like the rich person. So some criminal group, I would say they operate the business a little bit different. Then they will choose the different location, according to their business model.
Final question for Dr. Huang. How hard is it for survivors of sex trafficking, once they have been rescued, once they have been saved, once they have been able to escape through their own activities? How hard is it for them to reintegrate into society? Can you say anything about that struggle of reintegration?
Yeah, I mean, we in our research group, I have there is another faculty just focus on this kind of research. So we see many cases. The victim, they may take like 2 years or even more to go back to the society. The reason may, some of them can be, go back very quickly. Some of them they don't. Right now, we know the society that their living environment can be one issue because we don't have many like a dormitory, the kind of thing for this kind of victim. And then they need to go through the certain process to say, hey, right now they have some trauma, so we need to find a corresponding doctor who can make sure that they are they can actually back to the in a healthy state. Then sometimes we also need to provide something like make sure that they have some skills so that when they go back to the society, they still can find a good job. Make sure that they can maintain their living, a good living. So this kind of thing is very, I would say, need a lot of resource and not a lot of a volunteer, and then it's very time consuming. So I think this kind of thing is for the survival. Let's say it's a difficult one, but for our society, we really want to help them back to the society. So it's clear that like our group, we have people who try to find this kind of criminal group and then try to disrupt them. So that's one group. Another one will focus like how do we help them to recover, make sure that they can go back to the society. So that's another one.
This has been an outstanding presentation, Dr. Huang. It's been an outstanding series of questions from our student audience. Let's have everyone give a round of applause, a Zoom reaction applause for Dr. Edward Huang for this outstanding presentation. I want to compliment our student audience for your outstanding questions. I'm sure, and I know there were some that we just could not get to. If you want to stay after a few minutes, maybe Dr. Huang could answer your question at the end of our experience. But I want to just thank you, Dr. Huang, for being here. Thank all of our participating sponsors. And what a great way to end Women's History Month here at Winthrop University. Thank you so much, Dr. Huang, and thank you everybody for being a part of this incredibly informative cultural event.
I also want to thank you to invite me to give the talk. It's like my great pleasure to do this.
Thank you. Well, you're welcome back anytime. We really appreciated having you. We learned so much. And as you can see, the chat is being flooded by students saying thank you. You'll have to look at the chat afterwards. We'll save it for you so you can see all the great accolades you're receiving, Dr. Huang. Thank you all so much, our student audience, our faculty and staff support, and have a great evening, everybody. We loved having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.